Everybody is talking all the time about creating content and how important it is to create content. But are you actually maximizing the potential that your content has? Sammy here, host of the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. Happy to be here for another episode. And today I am thrilled to have another special guest here to talk to us all about SEO and how you can use it to repurpose your content, whether it's a blog post or podcast show notes or whatever it is. That's what we're going to dive deep into today. Darcy is the founder of Propel Marketing and Design. Propel is a full-service marketing agency located in South Florida that works with companies of all sizes. One facet of the organization and one of Darcy's true passions is in educating and training small businesses and entrepreneurs on improving their brand's online presence and website rankings. She is a recognized public speaker and educator on topics related to traditional marketing, content marketing, SEO, social media, WordPress, PR, and other digital marketing strategies. Over the past few years, though, online and in-person trainings, she's taught over 17,000 small businesses and entrepreneurs. I am so excited for you guys to hear this conversation because this is something that comes up all the time. And I want you to make sure that the time that you're spending on content is time well spent, and repurposing it is a great way to do that. So let's jump into this episode with Darcy Sullivan. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by our private Facebook community. Please come join us in this network of other entrepreneurs and small business owners where we navigate digital marketing and support each other in our websites, in our programs, and really just make sure we can reduce the overwhelm in what we're trying to get done to grow our business and meet our goals. You can do that by going to facebook.com/groups/the first click. I can't wait to see you there. Let's hop into it. You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Bedell-Mulhern, and each week I bring you tips from myself and other experts, as well as hot seats with small business owners and entrepreneurs to demystify digital marketing and get you on your way to generating more leads and growing your business. I would love to welcome Darcy to this week's episode of the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this conversation because I think it's content creation is one that stresses people out. So any way we can repurpose it, I think is a great thing. But before we kind of jump into that, why don't you just give people a little bit of background about, what you do, who you serve, all that good stuff.
Sure. So my name is Darcy Sullivan, and I am the owner of Propel Marketing and Design. I started the company about, I think it's 8 or 9 years ago. It runs together. And we help small businesses, marketers, and entrepreneurs focus on improving their online presence. And we do that through either a program we have for DIY, or with our clients through training, or we also offer done-for-you services.
Awesome. Super cool. And you're based in Florida, right?
Yes. And it's not quite, it's like one of the 4 days a year that it's kind of winter. So it's not quite there, but it's not 90 degrees today.
Oh, well, you'll get no sympathy from us here. We're supposed to get 6 to 10 inches of snow before Thanksgiving. We're recording this week of Thanksgiving. So yeah, cool. Wow. Well, I'm a big proponent of my audience creating content on a weekly basis, whether that's a podcast with show notes, whether that's a blog post, whatever it is. I'm a big proponent of that for them. So would you agree, or how much content do you kind of recommend people are creating on a regular basis?
Well, one, I think it depends on your bandwidth and it depends on your industry. We have some clients that we work with that are engineering related. And if we do like one solid piece per quarter, they're booming. Whereas other people do need to participate, and most people need to participate in the once a week or a couple times a month type pieces of content, which is why I love the subject today, because if you're revisiting and repurposing other pieces of content, you're not starting from scratch.
And repurposing in this standpoint, we're not talking about like how to leverage it on all of your different media outlets, channels, social media and stuff. But what's brilliant about this is repurposing existing content you've written on your website and just kind of updating it and tweaking it.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily even need to be a piece of content you've written on your website. You mentioned before the podcast with the show notes. That's taking a podcast and repurposing it then potentially into a blog post because you've got the show notes, or you've got the option of repurposing maybe a case study that you did, or a brochure, or a downloadable, or potentially a video. It's just taking a piece of content and updating it, refreshing it, and giving it new life. And one of the things that's nice about this is everybody doesn't take in information the same way. Some people love to watch videos, while others would prefer a detailed read to go through. So it gives you the opportunity to connect with an audience in a way that maybe you haven't before.
Well, and the assumption that they've seen it at all.
Right. Exactly. It could have been hidden somewhere, right? And this gives them the opportunity to take it in a new way.
So one of the things that we like to do is get people to kind of plan out what they're doing for the next 90 days or 6 months and kind of figure out what their launches are, what their big rocks are, what they really want to do. And then they can generate the content topics they want to talk about based on what they need their audience to understand about them or see them as a strong authority in. And so would your recommendation be then, before you even start to develop your strategy or your topics, to go back and revisit your older pieces of content that you've already created and then save yourself time by just going there first?
Yes, because we're not talking about content necessarily that you created a month or a week ago. We're talking about content that's, hopefully probably evergreen, living on your website. And what this gives you the opportunity to do, let's just say you dive into Google Analytics, you jump over to behaviors, look at your site content and all the pages. It's going to show you which pages are the most popular, which blog posts, which pieces of content really could use that zhuzhing up or repurposing to get them to the next level into a new audience.
So I do want to jump in a little bit more into Google Analytics, but I want to touch on something first before we get there. Mm-hmm. When we talk about then repurposing it and reusing it, what does that look like? Are you going into that existing URL and maybe adding like a section at the top that just says, like new updated for 2020? Are you, or are you just sharing that content with other people, with new people again?
So it depends. Okay, we've got the option of either just giving it a refresh, updating the piece of content, maybe a new piece of information came out, or maybe there's new strategies that you can accompany with your current piece. Maybe it's going in and, taking that piece and creating a slide share from it or a video from it, which would be, introducing it in a new way. Maybe it's you have a blog post that did such a great job that it's a great topic for you for a podcast that you hadn't thought of. Or maybe it's that you're looking at a piece of content and thinking, this is great for one style of learning, but I bet if we hired a graphic designer to put together an infographic for it, or even better, wait for it, you take one of your highly performing blog posts and you create a piece of content that somebody has to, like an upgrade to it, a content upgrade or whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's a checklist, something downloadable that then somebody would have to give you their email address to get. But this kind of, you let the information of what was working before guide you into how you could and should expand upon it.
And this can be really powerful for increasing traffic to your website as well. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the SEO, the search engine, how this can help with your optimization?
Absolutely. So let's just say you took a piece of content and we're going to give two very different examples. One will say it was a blog post or a podcast that did really well. And you're like, hey, let's go in, let's revise it, let's repurpose it, let's come up with a new piece of content for it. Well, when you're looking at Google Analytics and you're looking at Google Console, you can see which pages did the best. And when you're in Google Console, you can also see what keyword terms people were looking. So it gives you greater insight into them. So you can go back and update them with that. You also can consider, let's just say it was a piece of content that was developed a year or two ago before voice search. You can go in and add and direct it more by using questions, because when people do searches, right, they're usually asking a question. So you can go in and incorporate new ways that people look for information, knowing what information they're looking for.
That's a great little tidbit right there for sure.
Yeah. And then the other example is, we've worked with clients all the time that maybe they're not in so much of a creative space, but they've got these detailed reports, or they've got stuff that really positions themselves as industry leaders, but it wasn't necessarily on their website in a readable manner. And what I mean by that is it was either a PDF. So it's not like getting a hold of that Google goodness of being searchable in the same way that content on a page is, and also having it formatted. If maybe you put something together years ago and now you're realizing, okay, everybody's on mobile now, paragraphs that we used to use that were 5-6 sentences long, we need to break this content up in an easier, scannable way.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think one other question I have for you in regards to going back is it also a good opportunity then to add in those internal links and external links that may have also changed?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think about my podcast and, we haven't quite been doing it for a year. And so I know, and we like to link to other podcasts where people can dive deeper on a specific topic, for example. So we would probably link this one to the other SEO one we've done that's talking about sales, so that's a good opportunity to kind of add in those resources.
It's an excellent opportunity for that. And one of the tips that I would say with that is, when you're looking back at these other materials that you've created, think about what items relate to them and which ones you should connect to them. And if you're linking offline, which are off of your website, which you should as well, I always recommend that you open that up in a new window, because it would be a shame for somebody to read something on your website, think you're fantastic, click a link, end up off of your website and get distracted.
Yeah, 100%. And it's little details like that, I think, that make a big impact.
Absolutely. And again, going through and looking at that content and saying, is this as user friendly as it could be? Should I add some more images in there to break up larger pieces of text? Is there chances for bullet points that are easily scannable, in grabbing their attention at the very beginning? Because what they say, it's like the first sentence is, the only goal of the first sentence is to get somebody to read the second sentence. So it gives you the opportunity to go through and, revitalize some stuff and just kick it up a notch.
So going back to Google Analytics then, and some of the things you've been talking about, how often do you recommend people do kind of a content audit where they're taking a look at their analytics, maybe going back? Because if you're blogging or creating stuff on a weekly basis or even twice a month, that will add up quickly.
Yeah, I love the 90 days you mentioned, or once a quarter. And I think that it's really good to do this before you plan for the next 90 days, just so that you've got a basis of, okay, this is what we did. This is what works. This is what didn't work. How can we take this and how can we leverage it as we go to plan the next 90 days?
And so you would recommend then kind of going would you just recommend refreshing and repurposing your content as you need to reuse it then and paying attention to it then, so you don't actually have to go through every single piece of content you've created? Just go through maybe a chunk of them at a time.
Right. Well, I mean, what I would do is I would look at what are the best performing ones. And then again, if it's something that you just put out like a week or two ago, maybe just let it sit and ride a little bit longer. Let's not just go back and update everything all the time. But, you're going to see those hidden gems where you're like, wait a minute, this was a piece of content from 2-3 years ago and it's getting major traction. Some of the information in here is really outdated, because once you become this content machine, which I feel like we all are, and you've been in business for years and years, you've got some stuff that could easily be updated, and it makes more sense to update it than it does to, you don't want to create another piece of content that's almost identical to it.
Right. Why spend the time to create a whole new piece when you can just put a little bit of time and zhuzh up another one that already exists?
Yes. I love that word, zhuzh.
Yes, I don't use it enough. I should use it more. And I think it's really good for everyone listening to just put like half a day, like 2 or 3 hours on your calendar every quarter to review your analytics, your content, but then also your goals. Like you said, mention your goals first, because there's always tweaks and refinements to our websites that need to be made just in order to have the most relevant information there in front of our audience anyway. Like what events are coming up that you need to be changing, like what launches are happening, like your website's a living, breathing thing. So I think doing this in every 90 days is really important.
And one other thing to consider is that there's different stages to the buying cycle. When somebody first comes in contact with your business, they need different information than somebody that you're like about to close. So obviously everybody's sales cycle is different, but once you've clearly identified your buyer personas, which might take information in differently, some might like videos, some might like infographics, some would prefer that big long blog post. It gives you the opportunity to catch them at each of the stages of the sales cycle and offer them the information the way that would be best for them. And, think about it from a cross direction. If it was something that was performing really well as a blog post, it might be great as an ebook or as an email blast, which are still really putting you in the position of the authority figure, and also, driving more traffic to your website, depending on how you're using them.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then when we talk about, you mentioned something about PDFs earlier, and how would your recommendation be to just create a separate page on your website and have all that information there as opposed to a downloadable PDF, unless it's like a freebie in an email that you sign up for?
Right. So if it's like something that should be gated, something that they should only get access to if they've given you their email address, then I say no. But let's just say you had a downloadable that it just wasn't getting as much traction as you knew it deserved. You could do a more detailed intro, or let's just say it was a longer ebook. You could do a summary of it as a real page, and then give them the opportunity to download it. And we found, working with clients, that they've gotten a lot of traction by taking some of those bigger, juicier pieces of content and making them available directly on their website and blog.
As opposed to having them, gated or require an email address to download.
Right. They still get the opportunity. And I think you've even probably seen this in some blog posts where it's like, hey, don't have time to read this right now. Give us your email address and we'll send it to you.
That's an interesting way to set that up.
Yeah. So that way it's kind of like the double dipping. You can, because let's just face it, if it's something that's just like full of gooey goodness, somebody's going to want to come back to it time and time again. And they're probably not going to, mark you in your favorites. They're just going to say, hey, yeah, I'll get this email.
And then the other thing that I see a lot of people do that I wish they wouldn't is they do these big graphics with a lot of words on top of the graphic.
Oof.
And it looks okay, but again, you're not getting any credit for those words that are on that image.
You really aren't. And, that's definitely something to consider. If you are making infographics, you want to make sure everything's not only legible on the computer, but on the phone. Mm-hmm. And then again, you're not necessarily getting credit for the words that Google can't read, because Google can't read your images. So you want to make sure that you're actually using those words and descriptions in your content.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I just want to make sure I bring that up because I see that in a lot of, especially older websites, and it makes me sad because I'm like, you can't. You're giving great information here, and you aren't going to get any credit for that.
It's interesting because I even see that like in menus and just people that just have older, maybe it's a piece of their brochure that they just put up as the image and aren't getting that credit for it. And they're like, but it's on my website. And, you have to say it is, but it isn't.
So if I'm just getting started and I don't have anything to repurpose, do you think just wait a full 90 days of creating regular and consistent content and then just start your review cycle at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, like when you go to create your first piece of content, and again, I'm going to go back to the example that you gave in the beginning, where it's like you have a podcast and show notes. So basically you have a podcast and potentially a blog based on the same content. So when you're putting together your pieces of content from the get-go, decide how can we use this. And another example is video. Video is so big right now, but you can also use the transcribed version or build out more details about it. Take a video that you put on YouTube, embed it in a blog, and expand upon it in a blog. And that in itself is repurposing content. And let's
talk about that a little bit. Sorry. Like, for example, I have my podcast, we do show notes, and we've been playing with a couple different versions of show notes. I am also playing with adding a full transcript at the bottom of my show notes in order to, it would go to a separate page, but then all of that stuff is there if people want it. And same for video. I think you could do the same, but what is your take? I mean, I have my own opinion, but what is your take on kind of just writing a little brief synopsis of what it's about versus full on transcripts? I mean, I feel like they're a little bit harder to read.
You know what? I find it interesting because personally, what I like is a synopsis. Then when it says like at minute this much, we talked about has a one-liner about what we talked about. The next mark talked about this. Next mark talked about this. And then the full transcript. And I like them all on the same page.
You like them all on the same page?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because it's not duplicate content, because it all should go together. And it allows me, if I want to, like if I'm in a loud space and I go down and I see, well, at minute 20, you spoke about this widget, and then I can go scroll down, or I can type, do a search on that page for widget and just get like the goodness all written out of exactly what you spoke about.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Because sometimes it's easier than like fast forwarding to that particular time count.
And so similar for like if you had an embedded YouTube video.
Yeah. And, back to those people that are just getting started, what I like to tell people is think of the top, 2 to 3 questions you get asked all the time. And if you're struggling for ideas for content, start with those and don't try to go from A to Z because you can get overwhelmed. Like, your piece of content should solve one little problem or talk about one issue. Like we're talking about this, we're not talking about everything involved with content marketing. We're just talking about like this little section of it.
I like to always ask why, because I can usually pull 5 different topics out of one client's question. So I always say why. Like my favorite example is like yoga equipment, for example. As I say, for example, 5 times. you might think, well, I'm going to write a blog post about equipment you need for yoga. But you could really break that down into equipment for yoga for the home, for the person who practices at home, for the person who's going to the studio, for the person with low back pain, for the person who, you can, like, why do I care about yoga equipment? And then when you start to break out all of those problems, you can really come up with a bunch. Like, we have several podcast episodes about content marketing and SEO, because like you said, they're hyper specific.
Yes.
So
yeah. And that's exactly it. Like, when you dive into this content and content repurposing, it should be very specific. It shouldn't just be, you shouldn't be creating content for the sake of hoping to rank for a keyword term.
Right. Well, and so let's talk about the linking a little bit, because as you do, so if we're going to take the yoga example, if we've got all of these blog posts that are about yoga equipment, and my business is maybe selling a special yoga mat, and I'm whatever. So then if all of those posts are kind of linking to each other for, if you need more information about this or that, how does that kind of play into the SEO piece?
Okay. So we have a term that's called dwell time, how long someone dwells on your website, how long they stay on your website. And when you have links, what you're doing is saying, hey, you're on my website, you're reading this blog post, you like it, boom, here's some more information that I know is perfect for you because you're reading the content directly related to it. They click on that link, they stay longer. So that's one of the advantages of linking from page to page. It also helps Google determine the hierarchy of your page. Another key thing that I think we've kind of talked about, and one of the reasons that people love podcasts and videos and infographics for SEO, is that they help increase the length of dwell times, how long somebody stays on your page. So embedding a video, like let's just say you go to repurpose a piece of content and you're like, oh, but I don't have time to create a video that goes along with this. You can use somebody else's. It doesn't have to be yours, but embedding an infographic, again, it doesn't have to be yours. You have to cite the source, but including these things helps somebody stay on your site longer, which is a signal to Google that, hey, this site is awesome.
Right. They've got good stuff.
Yeah.
And I know as algorithms change, people get all in a tizzy and they get all stressed out about, but I think for me, I feel like, and I would love your opinion on this, but I feel like if you just create content, like all of the algorithm changes, whether it's social media, Google, whatever, they're all just trying to help or force us to just make better quality content that our audience actually cares about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like if you're getting hung up on things, like I can't tell you how many blogs we've worked with where there was an embedded infographic on it or a video. And so people stayed on there longer, but it wasn't developed. It didn't take time from the company that had it on their website. Again, if it was an infographic, they gave credit to the person that created it. But your whole goal is to add value. It's how can I help? And so when your website does that, you're not going to have these drops when it comes to algorithm changes because you're not trying to, get by the system. You're doing things the right way and you're truly adding value to your website.
Yeah.
And to your clients.
One other thing that I've seen that has worked really well with dwell time is also doing audio files. So if you don't want to do a full-on podcast, but you write blogs really well, either just record it. You could record it directly into your voice memos on your phone and just embed it. Or I think there's a program called Amazon Poly. I don't know if you've used that one.
No, I haven't.
But you can pay for it and then it will automatically record your words.
Yeah, I love that. I anything that you can do to, again, accommodate people. Now, one thing that I do just want to say to anybody who decides to embed video on their website, specifically to video, is don't have an auto start. There's nothing worse than somebody being, at their desk at work and they're not supposed to be surfing the net, and all of a sudden, boom, on comes a website's video that they're on and people are just like staring at them.
Well, and from an ADA compliance standpoint, that's a big no-no as well.
Right. But you'd still be surprised how many people still have that going on. So
no, I'm with you there. Don't have anything. Music. I hate it when you go to if bands are really good at this, auto playing their music right when you get there, and then you can't find the player. So you're trying to shut it off and you're like, I'll listen to it if I want to.
Yeah. And, while we're talking about user experience for a couple minutes, if you do have those juicy nuggets that you found, and those, like, there are those killer blog posts or pieces of content or a podcast that are like your top performers, because we go by the 80-20 rule. Typically 20% of your content is going to drive 80% of your traffic. The general 80-20 rule of everything. But if you do have those golden nuggets where you're like, these are the top items, make sure that they're either best of and you've got them visible on your homepage or on a sidebar. You don't want somebody to have to go search for them.
Okay, so maybe instead of just doing a general blog, like the three most recent on your homepage, you do
most popular, or just featured.
Yeah, featured is a great way to do that. Anything else or other kind of tips that you have seen, or not tips, but techniques or things that you've seen that can really help people save time on their content repurposing, as well as just increase their visibility?
Well, one, you've got to put yourself, it's not about you. It's about your potential buyer or potential customer. So how do they like to learn what format is best for them? And putting yourself in their shoes will really help drive you.
Yeah. And I think don't do it all either. The beauty of repurposing is do what you said earlier, right? The bandwidth and the time that you have, get what you can done now to, do it well. But I prefer to podcast over blog because this is much easier for me to do.
Right.
And so do what you like to do, get it out there. And then as your business grows, you can come back in and add some of these other elements.
And to that, there's always the concept of batching. Like, I feel like if you don't put something on your calendar, it's not going to get done. And if you don't just hammer at something, like sometimes for podcasts, what people like to do is just pick a day, do 3 of them in a day instead of spreading them out.
Yeah, that's what today is for me. I think I'm recording somewhere around 7 today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, wow. We do little quickies on Friday. So they're 10 minutes long. So it's not,
Love it. But I mean, that find your groove and find out what's easiest for you. But usually if you batch stuff together, it makes it easier, especially if you're gathering information. Like, let's just say, you've planned out your 90 days and that one topic that you need to hit on from multiple directions is fill in the blank. Well, as you're gathering information and putting it together, you're going to come up probably with ideas that float amongst the maybe 3 blog posts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love to get out just literally just print out a calendar and write in the important, what are the holidays that are happening in those 30 days? Is there anything major happening in my business, or am I just in a kind of, like you said earlier about the buying cycle, where are you at in the buying cycle with your customers? Because when you see it written out like that, some ideas come to you, right? So when I was doing, I think I got some topics booked out through, I'm booked out through May. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that popped up was I'm going to be working while on vacation for a full week in February. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can talk about what that experience is like, how I manage juggling, my kids while we're traveling and still having some big things that need to be done. So when you write it out in front of you, I don't know about you, but when I do that, then I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, this is happening. That's a great topic. I can talk about this. where sometimes it's hard if you're just thinking inside your head.
Yeah. And there's like what I like to call backwards math. Like, let's just say, on one date that you're going to be at an event, a trade show, whatever. Okay. Well, leading up to that, you want to push out particular content that's associated with it. Okay. Well, if we want to, push out these pieces of content, if you do need anything from a graphic designer, if you do need to record any video, it helps you make sure you're not like hurry, rush, last minute.
Yeah. And that's when mistakes happen.
Exactly.
And then we start to get stressed out and shy away from wanting to do it because we put ourselves out there and we messed up.
Yeah. And it's a lot less overwhelming having everything kind of pre-scheduled and pre-calendared out.
Yeah. Okay. So from an SEO perspective, I love what you're saying. Just pay attention to your audience, pay attention to Google Analytics. And guys, she's not talking about spending like hours diving through all of these things, right? Like you can get a lot of information from Google pretty quickly. So you mentioned going to the behavior section, right?
Yes. Yeah. So you really, again, this isn't something that's going to take you forever. You just want to jump in. You can go to the behavior tab, site content, all pages, and you can see what your top performing pages are. And obviously, like your homepage is usually always up towards the top. I am not suggesting that every couple of months you need to update your homepage unless you feel like there's new relevant content that should be on there. What I'm talking about more is the blog post, or again, those hidden pieces of gems that you just didn't realize either they're older content or they're not in a format that would be ideal for your users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just keep it users first. Make sure. Yeah. I think there's a lot of really good takeaways that you said, but just really writing for your user, keeping you out of it and making it about them, creating content in multiple ways that your audience can consume how they want to. And then, just reviewing and going back and using stuff that is working well to get you back in front of new audiences. I love it. Any other ideas or suggestions you want to make for the audience?
Ooh, I have tons. I'm trying to think.
I know it's like a rabbit hole that we could go down forever.
I would say, one of the things that, again, we chatted about, but just, your strengths, your capabilities. So if it's better to embed a video that somebody else has, or, obviously don't use your direct competition, but, infographics that are already out there. Like if you're strapped for time and creativity, you can use some of those assets as long as you give them credit for them without feeling as overwhelmed.
I have a question about that. Would you, because I know I get these emails all the time, but if you were going to embed somebody else's video, would you reach out to them and make it a point to say, hey, I'm going to be using your video. I would like to use your video because it just goes really nicely with my content. Is there a specific page you would like me to link that credit back to? Like, would you reach out to them and offer that up, or would you leave that alone?
Well, if you're embedding it from like YouTube or Vimeo, it's kind of, it's a little bit different, but you can usually tell on, let's just say YouTube, if they've got their notes from it, what page they're linking to. And usually if you click on that page, you'll see that there's additional content directly related to that. So I think it depends on, that's kind of a tough one to answer.
I guess I would say if it's somebody you want to maybe use that to build that collaboration and connection with, maybe, but otherwise just leave it be if it's just something good that you want.
Now let's just say you have like a fantastic infographic about a certain topic. Like there are tons of people that reach out and offer that to other people, and they'll email them and say, hey, I love your article on fill in the blank. We have an infographic that ties in directly to that. If you're interested in using it, please let me know. I can send it to you in the link that it should link to our website. And that type of infographic outreach, or even you reaching out and saying, hey, I just saw this blog post you did. We have a fantastic video that's associated with it. If you want to use it, here it is, can really help you in regards to getting your name out there, getting backlinks to your website. So that's kind of something that we probably should have touched on earlier, which is a whole nother element to repurposing and pushing it out in a different way.
Yeah. And I've seen that done really well. And I've seen it done
really bad too,
really
right?
Bad.
It really can go in both directions.
I mean, it's just the same as when I reach out to people to be a guest on their podcast.
Yeah.
Right. If you are just blanket saying, hey, I wrote this great article and you have a blog post about SEO and content, you should have my link in here. Right. Like,
right.
It's terrible.
Just terrible. And I mean, I can't tell you how many we get just like that. But you've got to, if you are going to do that reach out, it needs to be personal. It needs to be like a real connection, and it just needs to be done differently.
It needs to be done thoughtfully, I think.
Yeah, and tastefully, and not just blanketed. And nothing's worse than getting one that has the wrong name associated with it. So you know that they copied and pasted and forgot to change the name.
Yep, we get that all the time. Or we get ones that say, we saw your blog post, but then it's just to our generic blog page. It's not even to a specific post. So yeah, I think when you're ready, when you've been generating a lot of content and you're like, okay, I'm ready to kind of get out there and get on more, do it with time in mind. Like, it's going to take you time to pull it together. Get a VA to do all the research for you, but then make sure that
And one other thing, when it comes to blog posts, some things that people can consider, if they've got like one blog post that's just knocking it out of the park, you can consider putting that on LinkedIn. You know how you can have the articles on LinkedIn. You could use Medium. You could try it out with just one or two and see if sometimes it works really well for people. Sometimes it doesn't. So it gives you the option to try it out, and then always, originally seen on, and direct them back to your website, or do 3/4 of it, continue, get more information, continue reading on the website.
Do you recommend one version of, do you recommend not putting the whole thing on LinkedIn and Medium and clicking back to the website? Or, because I know there's the whole duplicate content thing, and then there's also the wanting to drive them back to your website.
Right. So I like the idea of maybe doing like a 3/4 of it and to read the expanded version to go to your website. So one, you need the content on your website to be sitting there long enough for Google to pick it up as if it's yours.
Yeah.
Then you're not going to get in trouble. It's not that your website's going to rank lower because you put a version of it out there on LinkedIn. The whole concept and the whole reason to do that is if you have a really big following on LinkedIn and you want to drive that traffic to your website, it gives you that opportunity. Some people are super successful with it. Some people are not. And, we're not talking about a 250-word blog. We're talking about some real deep, juicy content. So again, it's nice to be able to test the waters. It's nice to be able to test the waters for free.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on how your audience goes about gathering their information. And I mean, you've probably seen even Instagram posts that are maybe 2 paragraphs deep into a blog post. And then it's hey, go to the blog to read the rest, which for some people it works and for some people it doesn't.
Yeah, I think, and that's, I mean, repurposing your content outside of your website. I mean, there's so many things that you can do. And I think that's really going back to, I think, what we talked about earlier with regards to people haven't seen everything you've made. Use one piece as many times as you can and do it several times, because I think people don't there's so much out there. And how many times, I mean, this happens to me all the time where you see something and in that moment you're like, oh, that's cool, but I don't really have time. And then you remember the headline and you're like,
now, again,
where did I see that?
Yeah. And, that is one of the things that I love about that little hey, don't have time to read this blog post or this article, we'll email it to you, because then you get their email. You're not having to create a whole new piece of content, right? And
it's really passive, right? Well, not in a bad way, but you're solving a problem for them. You're saying you're making it about them and not about you. You're not saying get on my email list so I can send you an email. You're saying, hey, I understand there's a lot here, so let me do you a solid and just email it to you.
Exactly. So again, if you have any of those eBooks, because eBooks are not as popular as they were maybe a year or even in years past. So if you've got any of those old, just deep content, consider, doing that. Or if it's really too big, breaking it up into those micro moments that are equivalent to a blog post.
So can you explain for people, because I get this question a lot too, the difference between a white paper and an ebook and all these terms that they have for these downloadables?
So, okay, it used to be a case study was we went to X company, there was this problem, this is how we solved it. Pretty simple. White papers used to be kind of a theoretical, here's this problem, this is the solution to the problem. Not here's the problem and solution in motion. And then ebooks were hey, getting started with Facebook marketing, here's an ebook about it. Or, everything's kind of merged together. It just depends on the terms people use to call it. And, an ebook these days could be 4 pages or it could be 400 pages. So I think that's why people are moving more towards the term downloadable, because it's kind of the catch-all.
Yeah. So don't worry much about what you call it, just make it good.
Yeah. And if you're just getting started, checklist or something simple. Don't think that you have to tackle a 40-page ebook. People like their information really simple and easy to digest.
Yeah. But I like what you said about pulling out chunks. If you do have a large ebook, pulling out those, I'm assuming you would have core topics in there and specific little tidbits. We could probably take 10 different sound bites from this interview and I could share that several times. So get creative and break it down to the smallest common denominator. I think you mentioned that earlier too. What's the one topic or the one answer to the question your audience has, and maximize on that.
Yeah.
And do it over and over and over again. Yeah.
But again, the whole point of this is that if you already have something that's working for you in one way or another, make it work for you again.
Yeah.
And it's the idea of saving you time and saving you energy. And that's
I love it. Yeah. Just double down on what works. Why reinvent the wheel?
Exactly.
Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate all of your insights, and I'm going to get going on my content. And
I love it. Thank you for having me.
If people want to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Sure. So they can visit propelyourcompany.com, and we have tons of resources on that site from all different types of downloadables, blog posts, and we usually have some kind of mini free training that's floating around there.
Nice. And we will link up everything in the show notes as well. So you can grab those in and get in touch with Darcy if you want to. So thank you again for joining me on this episode. It was wonderful.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you too.
Thank you again to Darcy for joining us on this episode. I can't wait to hear what your biggest takeaways were. So make sure you share them with us in our private Facebook community. You can find that by searching the First Click community in Facebook. And I hope you'll check out the show notes from this episode for all the resources for things we talked about. And make sure you subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss out on a single episode. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.